again, everybody. How are you? Hopefully you enjoyed that video on Kathy Bush and her daughter Jennifer. This is equally fascinating. Dissociative identity disorders in Module 69. It used to be called multiple personality disorders. Really started with this woman, Sybil. You see her in the upper right-hand part of your screen. They made a really interesting Hollywood movie back in the 1950s about it called The Three Faces of Eve. And this is an incidence in personality or psychological disorders where the individual thinks they have multiple personalities living inside them. Very, very fascinating. Again, you see at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, is this real? This is very, very controversial because many psychologists say, look, these people are either faking it or they have something else going on, an extreme form of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder that shouldn't be classified as dissociative identity disorder. It is fascinating. I'll have you watch a couple videos of people here, read a case study of people that have dissociative identity disorders. Again, controversial and really, really, really interesting to study. People that are transsexuals or transgendered, that's one thing, but is this a disorder? The difference is people that are transsexuals are people that are, they think they have a different identity inside them. The upper left-hand corner there picture is of a person that seemingly was maybe born a male, but he identifies as a female. He's a transsexual. His identity is different than his biological gender. Transgendered people are people that have actually made the switch, the physical switch. The person on the bottom right is Dennis Rodman. He used to be a Chicago Bulls basketball player. I don't think really identifies as a female, but he says, I just like to dress up as a woman sometimes, just to kind of make waves and get some attention. But again, is that a disorder? Maybe not. We're way more accepting of people than we have been in the past. Interesting thing to note is gender identity disorder, GID. That's very, very fascinating. And again, we're talking more about that as a society. So it's really cool and interesting. One of the first people to kind of get us involved with that, discussing that, is Caitlyn Jenner, used to be called Bruce Jenner. Bruce Jenner, if you see that picture there on the left, was a star athlete back, I think, in the 1976 Olympics for America. He won lots of gold medals and running the decathlon. And then he came out maybe 10 years ago and said, I've always been a woman. I want you to call me Caitlyn. Excuse me. Excuse me. And she was on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine. And it's interesting how people talked about this and saw her and treated her after this. They always saw her as Bruce, but she sees herself as Caitlyn. Again, interesting, fascinating, controversial. What about when it gets down into children? What about when young boys always identify as girls or vice versa? Girls always identify as boys. I think the person there that you see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is a young girl named Jazz. She was born a male as a young boy, always identified as a female. So she had her own reality TV show, I think. I don't think she's still on. But it's interesting from a parent's perspective, what do you do? What exactly do you do? And do you allow your child even to make the physical transformation into the other gender? I wish we were in the classroom. We always had some really interesting conversations about this, but at a minimum, it's interesting to think about. Again, maybe not a disorder, gender identity disorder, along the lines of dissociative identity disorder, but it is this interesting notion of identity and who we are as people. Next time we gather, we'll talk about serial killers. Kenneth Bianchi is a very, very interesting serial killer, now dead. But it's interesting how he was used, actually, dissociative identity disorder as his legal defense, and how he was called up to the witness stand and how he called forth all these people, most notably this person that lived inside of him, Steve. And Steve actually claimed that Ken was a goody-goody and that Steve, was the actual murderer that killed all these women. Didn't work. State found him guilty and he went to prison. But maybe he really was suffering from dissociative identity disorder. Fascinating stuff, right?